Welcome to the Daily Tanya. Today is Wednesday, the 19th day of Cheshvan. Let's begin with tzedakah. Leila tzedakah, shemekarev esesageulah. Tzedakah brings Mashiach closer. Make sure to put tzedakah every day. Doesn't matter how much, a little bit of tzedakah every single day brings Mashiach closer. So we continue in chapter 29, letter 29 in Igeret Hakodesh. Yesterday we spoke about the need of every neshama to fulfill the all 613 commandments, and for that reason the soul comes back again and again, is being reincarnated until it fulfills all the 613 commandments, except of course for the commandments that belongs to the king and so on. And we explained why is it necessary to fulfill all the 613 commandments. And that's because the mitzvahs, they serve as a garment for the soul to be able to enjoy the pleasure, godly revelation. Now, what does that mean? That's what the Alter Rebbe is going to talk about today. You know, you mentioned in the past about the neshamas, that there are souls waiting up there in heaven. They're waiting to come down to this world. And why are they waiting? What's so special in this world? This world is a corrupted world, a world of darkness, lies, and all kind of nonsense happening in this world. Why does the neshama want to come down to this world? And the explanation is because there is something the neshama is able to gain by fulfilling the actual mitzvahs, the actual commandments in this world, and that gives the neshama the garments to be able to enjoy the great light. In other words, the soul up there is a created being, is a creation of Hashem. The soul itself is not able to achieve grasping in the godly revelation without being nullified. It is so intense that it is not able to receive that godly light. In order to be able to receive the godly light, it needs a special garment. Now, what can be a garment? What can be a garment that enables the soul to receive that intense light? Is when the garment comes from the intense light itself. So how does this translate to commandment mitzvahs? So the Alter Rebbe explains that just like by a human being, it says God creates us in His image. We can learn how things work up there by understanding the way it works by human beings. So by human being, you have what is the ultimate thing that drives a person. So we know they say that when there is a will, there is a way. The will, the power of will, when you have a desire, you want to do something, there's nothing that can stop it. The desire drives everything when you have a desire to do something. But there is something even deeper than the desire. What makes a person desire? What makes a person desire is the pleasure. Why do you want something? Why do you want a house, a certain particular house? Because that brings you pleasure. The pleasure creates the desire. So both pleasure and desire are above the logic, above the emotions, but they're connected with the higher levels which encompasses, surrounds the person's faculties. But the pleasure is the inner part. The desire is the external part of that is driven by the pleasure. So when we're talking about the godly light, this is the pleasure. The pleasure that the neshama enjoys, the pleasure of this godly light. How are we able to receive that godly light? And when we have a garment that comes from that godly light. What is the garment? The desire, the external part of that godly light, which is Hashem's desire. What is Hashem's desire? That is, we should do the mitzvahs. That is why when we do a mitzvah, we fulfill Hashem's desire. Doing that makes a garment of for the soul to be able to enjoy the pleasure. Let's see inside the way the Alter Rebbe explains this. Says the Alter Rebbe, V'hinei, oil ze agonuz latzadikim losid lovai, anikro b'shem noyam Hashem v'tzachtzachos leisaneg al Hashem. Now this light hidden away for the righteous for the time to come is termed, as mentioned above, the pleasantness of God and the pleasurable thirst. Noyam Hashem is the pleasantness of God, and tzachtzachos is the pleasurable thirst. Tzacha means thirsty. The constant thirst, leisaneg al Hashem, to be of delighting in God. In a Kabbalistic term, says the Alter Rebbe, it is called V'daled meyes almin de kisufim de misangebo en tzadikaya chulu k'meshekos of 400 shekel kesef chulu. And also the 400 worlds of longing in which the tzaddikim delight, as it is written, 400 shkalim of silver kesef. This is actually from this week's Torah portion. We read in the portion that Abraham bought the Me'aras HaMachpelah, the field from Ephron to bury Sarah, and he gave to Ephron 400 silver shekels. So this 400 silver shekels represents a very mystical thing. There are 400 worlds of longing. What is the 400 worlds? It is, every world. We have the 4 worlds. Atzilus, Bria, Yetzir, and Asiya. In each world there is the 10 attributes, the 3 intellective attributes and the 7 emotive attributes. And each one of the 10 is made out of 10. Like we say, Basfiras Aymed, we have the Chesed Shebechesed, Gvura Shebechesed. So you have 10 times 10. 10 times 10 is 104 worlds, is the 400, and these represent the 400 worlds of longing that the tzaddikim receive, and that is what Avram gave to Ephron. In a way, it placed this godly energy into the lowest places, and there was a reason for it, because ultimately, but the redemption is going to take it out. In the meantime, there was also, as a result of that, Esau had 400 people as a result of the 400 shekels that Avram gave to Ephron. In any case, it's a little Kabbalistic things. But the bottom line here is that we're talking about great levels of pleasures that tzaddikim are able to reach higher and higher. This light comprises very many rungs and levels, one superior to the other. Now, in order to be able to gain access to these lights, you must have a garment that comes from that same light. But the minute radiance which descend level after level to create this garment that garbs the soul belongs to the lowest level of this light. Metaphorically speaking, it is referred to as the external level, or acharayim, כמו שכוסו בזה ידב ריש חס עמוד בייז, I'm בספר מקדש מלך, וריש יוד עמוד בייז, ומד ישתחולו, as stated in the Zayar, page 208b, the commentary entitled Mikdash Melech, and 210b, and it says there, after that which is left, meaning that the light, which is the source of the garment, is of the most external and hindmost levels. So now, in order to understand what we're talking about, the Alter Rebbe is going to give the example of the person. That there is different levels of desires that a person has. There are different levels of pleasures that a person has. So it says, "V'nikimoish adam yesh bo koyach hataynu shemisanegeg ma sheyesh lo oineg mimenu. K'moi maskola seichel chodesh u'kai gavne." On the soul of man, there is a faculty for pleasure. The soul takes pleasure in what it finds pleasurable. Now, what do you find pleasurable? So here the Alter Rebbe brings an example as in the conception of a new insight or the like. Talking about pleasure, there's obviously different levels to have pleasure. You give a candy to a child, he's going to have pleasure. If you ask a child, what would you rather, have the candy or go on a walk in a park? He certainly will choose the candy. Other people have different ideas of pleasure. The pleasure of the intellect is a very high example of pleasure. When you try to understand a certain subject and all of a sudden you get flash and you says, yes, I got it, I understand it, that brings a tremendous pleasure. Now the external and the hindmost aspect of the soul's power and state of delight is the faculty of will. Willing that which it wills, meaning something that is not painful. For pain is the opposite of delight. So the desire is the external aspect of the pleasure. You desire something that makes you pleasurable. Metaphorically speaking, it is the same with the infinite Ein Sof light, as it were. לבחינת חיצוניוס ואחוריים, לבחינת עונג העליון ונועם השם, וצחצחויס ועלמא דגסופים ונזכרים לעיל. So the supernal will is the external and inmost aspect, meaning the resultant chitzoniyut and achorayim, the external part of the above-mentioned supernal delight, the pleasantness of God, the pleasurable thirst, and the world of longing. So in other words, what he's saying, these levels of the pleasantness of God, the external part of it is the desire of Hashem. When Hashem has a desire, you know that this brings pleasure to Hashem. Because what drives the desire? It is the pleasure. So when we know what is the desires of Hashem, is that we here in this physical world should fulfill actual mitzvahs. So by tapping in to this desire of Hashem, which we can only do while we are here in this world, that gives us an access to the inner level of godliness, which is the pleasure in the greatness of Hashem. Though these the supernal delight and the supernal will are fused in absolute unity with God, and His will are one. For God and His will are one. So this is something we spoke in the Shah Yichud Ve'emunah, that Hashem and His will is one. It's not something we can differentiate. And not heaven forbid, like the will of man, neither wholly or partially. It's not at all. Ve'in dimyon b'neim klal. There being no similarity whatsoever between them. Man's will is not wholly one with the person himself. It is one of the soul faculties that he possesses. By contrast, God and his will are one. So how then can we differentiate above between pleasure and will, saying that God's pleasure is internal and his will is external? So the Alter Rebbe says that the Torah just uses in our language, metaphorically speaking, so we can have some kind of an idea, even though it's certainly not the same as our will and our pleasure. But we get an idea of what happens in the upper worlds with the pleasure of Hashem and the desire of Hashem. Afal piken dibro Torah kol shem ben yodam l'shakich o ize ma sheyechola l'shmoya b'moshel u'melitza minishma sa'odam aklula mikeich atayne gvarotzen v'chochma binu v'chulu. Nevertheless, the Torah speaks in human idiom in order to modulate for the ear what it is able to hear, with allegory and metaphor relating to the soul of man, which compounds the faculty of delight, will, wisdom, understanding, and so on. כנראה בחוש שכשאדם משכיל איזה שכל חודש נפלא, אזי באויסר רגע על כפונים נולד לו תענוג נפלא בשכלו. This is empirically evident, for when a person conceives some wonderful new insight, then at that moment, at least, a wondrous delight is born in his mind. When you get an idea, it gives you a tremendous delight. Thus it follows that the capacity for pleasure surpasses by far the faculty of intellect and wisdom. It merely is vested in the faculty of intellect and wisdom. Now, what happens when a person really understands it properly? There is the wisdom. Wisdom is the flesh, which brings you pleasure. Now, when you really truly understand that's already in the intellect, it is considered the level of bina. The first level is chachma, the idea, the spark. Bina is the understanding, the processing of the idea. That certainly gives you much more pleasure. And that is why he says the olam haba, the world to come, is referred to as bina, because that is where, in the world of understanding, we appreciate and we grasp godliness. Thus, when a man feels a subject of intellect and wisdom, that is, he apprehends and understands it well, he then also senses the faculty of pleasure, which is vested in the subject of wisdom. That is why in the sacred Zohar, the faculty of Bina, the understanding, is referred to as the world to come. Why? For it is the state of manifestation of the Chachma, together with the delight vested in it, which the righteous in the Garden of Eden apprehend and conceive the new insights in the penimius, meaning the innermost mystical dimensions of the Torah. For the Torah derives from Chachma, and the Torah and the Holy One, blessed be He, are entirely one. So therefore, this Alter Rebbe gives us the introduction that to understand. Now, this is why we need the mitzvahs. The mitzvahs is the will of Hashem, and the will of Hashem comes from, it is external part of and driven by the pleasure in the godliness. And that is why this gives us the garments for the soul to be able to enjoy the light of Hashem. And as we shall continue tomorrow, Bezat Hashem, have a wonderful day.